Hello and welcome to the Happy PharmD podcast. I'm Dr. Alex Barker. I'm the founder and coach here at the Happy PharmD. And with me today, I'm joined by the very lovely and kind and generous Laura Lacari. Laura and I share a special bond. Yes, we're both pharmacists. Yes, we both are coaches. She works with me here at the Happy PharmD. Yes, we both love academics and we teach at colleges. But we share a special bond because we both lost our fathers around the same time. We're going to be talking about something today that I think will be very hard for some people to hear. And I think for the right person, it's going to be helpful. We're going to be sharing our stories of what we went through and how we were able to overcome grief as professionals. Overcome, honestly, maybe a hard, maybe a hard claim, because there's still moments when we're sad. There are still moments when we feel like we can't work. But if there's something that I wish was out there when I was going through grief was a professional talking about grief in their life and how it negatively affected them professionally. There were days I didn't want to work. There were times when I felt like giving up. And there were even times when I and Laura felt like we were complete worthless sacks of crap and we didn't know what to do about it. In this episode, we're going to be sharing things that helped us go through this journey of grief. We're also going to be sharing some things as well that you need to be aware of as an employee, because I hate to say this because I sound like my grandmother, but everyone at some point is going to pass on. Unless you don't love anyone, then you're not going to get hurt. And at some point in your professional journey, you will likely lose someone, and you won't know how hard that is until you face it. My hope is that this gives you a little bit of inspiration, maybe some ideas to consider if you're going through it now, as well as I think it is cathartic to hear other people talk about their pain and suffering, because when I was going through it, at first, I didn't feel like I could talk to anyone about this. I felt very alone. And so I want to make it known that, yes, you as a pharmacist can grieve and it's going to be challenging, but you can get through this. And so with that out of the way, let's go to the interview. Hey, Laura.
Hey, Alex.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. I appreciate your time and your willingness to share your journey.
I am happy to see you.
So for a little bit of context for anyone, Laura and I are friends, like officially friends. We have been working together. Laura has been a coach in our company, and she's been with me through the good and the bad and the good again. Um, Laura, you and I met, I believe, in the year of the pandemic, right?
That is right.
2020.
July 2020, almost our 4-year anniversary, friend-iversary.
um, yeah, and both of us experienced a death in our family at pretty very similar times, and we went through very similar journeys. And so I think it would be great to kind of give context around what happened and what we went through because of it. Um, you and I both lost our fathers. Um, and what was your relationship to your father? What was that like?
And that's a complicated answer, as it might be for quite a few people.
Sure.
So I was 42 when my father passed away. I did not have any step parents, so I had one father growing up, and that was my only father. So for 42 years, I had the same father figure. And then all of a sudden, as you know, they're gone. And that is very It was very shocking and very difficult to deal with, and it was more difficult than I anticipated it was going to be. And our relationship was, and I feel very comfortable saying this because it's the truth, it was complicated. It was supportive. He was very proud of me. He was the first person in his family to go to college, and then he got an MBA, and then I was the first person to get a doctorate. So he was always so proud of our immigrant family and that I achieved a doctorate in 2 generations. So, but there was also times where communication was difficult. So, as I'm sure we'll unpack, there's a lot to explore once you realize you can't have conversations anymore.
Yeah. My father wasn't my biological father, but he was my adoptive father. My mom got divorced when I was 2, and he came in our lives when I was 3, 4, late threes, fours, and I think he got married he got married to my mom when I was around 5. Um, and it wasn't apparent until I was like in my late 20s just how much of a scar that divorce left on me.
Mm.
But my dad did his best. Nothing like me in the slightest. He would have made a great pharmacist. Very detail oriented, very humble, mild mannered,
Mm.
meek, but also a little socially awkward. Um, in an endearing way. Like once you kind of understand him, like you knew where he was coming from, but not like painful awkward, just like lovable awkward, maybe.
Yeah, that's the best.
Yeah, he was a great man. We had a hard relationship growing up because we were such opposites. Like I sought attention and I wanted to be a clown. He was like, "What is this?" You know, he didn't get it. He didn't like that behavior very much. He was very much of a rule follower. He was a chemical engineer, and so it was kind of like a lot like pharmacy. Like it's
Mm.
built into us to follow rules. Um, but our relationship got better as we got as I got into my 20s.
Mm.
I realized how much wisdom he had and leadership experience, and the relationship got a lot better in the second half of my life. And like your father, he was diagnosed with a terminal brain cancer. Um, we had about a year of a prognosis. Yours was shorter, was it not?
So that's a long answer, actually. And I just want to, I think a year is quite short, right? For this person being in your life for 3 decades, to have a year of kind of painful anguish, knowing what the outcome is going to be,
Yeah.
that's really hard. And in my situation, it was actually a very long process. My father was diagnosed with salivary cancer when he was 48, and he did not pass away from complications of cancer until he was 72.
Wow.
So the long goodbye was almost there was never a timeline for us. And it's something my mom and I have really tried to work through, and I'll mention this a couple times. I am in ongoing therapy for the last 4 years, and on and off
Yeah.
before that in my life. And my mom is actually also in ongoing therapy and trying to unpack not only the complicated relationship we had with him, but also how much his ongoing health issues for almost 30 years really impacted our family dynamics.
Yeah.
And then just to kind of, be honest, what we went through was the last 3 weeks, we kind of finally knew that there was not going to be a recovery. And so he was in hospice for 1 week. And that was a painful but beautiful experience.
Mm. Yeah, it doesn't really matter how much time you get. It sucks either way, you know. One of the things that helped me both go through it and recover as well was talking with you and with others as well who've lost parents or loved ones. And um, people who say, yeah, it was really long. I wish it was shorter. Uh, and then some say like it was really short. I wish it was longer. You know, I think
Isn't that interesting?
either way, it sucks.
Yeah.
Like there's just no way around it. A year. It was a challenging year, mainly because he just wasn't himself. Ever since the surgery
Mm,
and then the chemo and radiation made it worse, he was different. Um, Unable to focus, more fixated on things and like single-minded, to the point of annoyance. And that year was very hard, for me to concentrate. Um, I'm curious about your journey, since my role as CEO, it forces me to be very creative. Like I have to spend a lot of my time thinking, strategizing, planning. And there was a big part of me that just wanted to be an AmCare pharmacist again. Like show up to work, uh,
absolutely.
handle my patients, go home. Um, I I think in either case I would have been depressed, but at least in the case of being like a traditional pharmacist role, I would just have to show up and do a job versus like think, and go through that process. I know you're in academia, which involves a lot of the same kind of work that I do. Did you have that experience as you were going through this?
You and I talked about this probably a year. And again, our I don't know if you've mentioned it, but our dads passed 3 months from each other, right? So it was we were right in it together. So you, I think, were kind of I have told you this, hard on yourself for feeling maybe a perception of not being able to just pick yourself up and get back to the grind. And I feel very strongly that we live in a culture that does not allow for an appropriate amount of mourning. You are an entrepreneur and an independent owner, so you could take kind of how much time you wanted. But I'm sure people listening to this are kind of thinking, what's my bereavement leave? And mine was 4 business days. And that just seemed right, just unbelievably short. Now, I work at an institution with a wonderful group of people. So off the record, I was given, as much mental leave as I needed. And there were reduced expectations for what my output would be.
Mm.
But I will, going back to the question itself, it was impossible to work. It was impossible to work. And at the oddest times, I would just burst into tears, like getting a folder out of a filing cabinet and some image would pop into my head and I was done. I would be done for 10 minutes and just cry at living in the reality of the new situation. And that really felt, to your point, impossible to focus. And I didn't feel like I had that many people besides you and a few other people in my life who understood how hard it was to mourn, to grieve, and then try to do a job on top of it.
All of it was a blur to me, but
Mm.
I remember specifically with you, I remember talking to you at one point, and like all we talked about was just how awful this
Mm.
was. And
And
there was definitely some chuckling and I think some tears as well, that you can't operate. You're right. I was really blessed to set up my business to the point where I could step away. Um, I think Thanksgiving, my dad got in an argument with me on Thanksgiving Day about whether or not he had taken a Tylenol. And that's when I knew. I was like, I can't argue with my dad about Tylenol and be a good CEO. I have to step away.
yeah.
Um, he passed away two months earlier, and I was still doing occasional things, like something that maybe I needed to sign off on. Um, but, and then after his passing, I had another 2 weeks, or I'm sorry, 2 months. And I slowly began doing things during that time, but the vast majority of it was waking up, existing, maybe doing 2 or 3 social things a week outside of my house, but spending a lot of time just playing video games, chilling out with family, like doing very, very little of anything. And I understand that most people will never be able to have that kind of time. Um,
I
I don't,
think, well, another layer to that too, Alex, is it's you. I wanted to work. I wanted to desperately think about
sounds
anything else except the reality that I was
yeah.
going through. So I wanted to be at work in my office with my colleagues who I feel so much emotional intelligence from. And we have a great culture at my employer. And I couldn't, I couldn't. All I could do was be sad every day for months. And I just desperately wanted to feel like myself. And I couldn't. And also the physical part of grieving, like the crying itself is like physically exhausting. I had headaches. My
Yeah.
chest and my abdomens were tight. Abdomen was tired. So just the amount of, again, you could only exist because there was no other energy to do anything else, even though you desperately just wanted to get back to normal.
What were some of the things that helped you the most? Moments or conversations that you had where you felt a little bit of relief, or maybe even just a shift in how you felt?
Yeah, it was conversations. But the irony was, again, I didn't want you to be going through how much I was hurting,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
of right? So it's so
Uh,
interesting. All of a sudden, you do find people in my life, 2 people very in my close circle actually lost their dads very shortly before and about a month after. And that just being able to articulate again, like starting off the day and sending a text and being like, I just can't work today. And the person saying, I can't either. And just try your best because they knew what you were going through and vice versa, but you also did not want them to be feeling that way. I would say finding a community was the most helpful.
yeah. We were able to take a trip to Florida for a week, and during the winter months when the death passing, that was very cathartic. And I got to read this book by my favorite fiction author, Brandon Sanderson, and I had a great cry. One of the main characters in this book is he's gone through pain just like you and I have. He lost his brother, and he's depressed because of it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I know exactly what he's going through. But conversations as well. I was really, it's kind of wild. I know my regional representative. He was my babysitter as a kid,
That's
and
wild.
it's yeah, it's really wild. And he gave me a call, maybe like a couple of weeks after, just out of the blue. I was like, I saw the area code, and I was like, who's calling me? And it's him. And we only talked for 5 minutes, but I remember asking him, what has helped you come back to a normal life? And he said, you can't.
Mm,
But if you can accept it, and if you
mm-hmm.
think of this more of like, this is a journey, and just like a ship on an ocean, you're going to go through storms, and the first one will feel like it's the end of all things. You won't come back from this, but you learn how to manage it. You learn how to anticipate these moments, of grief and sadness and anger, and you learn how to go through it with more grace for yourself and compassion for yourself. And hopefully you can learn as well, like how to make them shorter. um, there were times when I would go to my parents' church with my mom, because this is obviously a huge shift for her. So I was going to there to support her, and like I couldn't work the next day, which
Mm.
sucks because church is on Sunday. And I was like, holy crap, this is awful. I'm not going to do this again for a while. Um, but I learned over time to accept the feelings, not judge them, not feel bad about them, and to allow my love to go into better places that, for people that are currently alive.
Yes.
I get to use that energy for something else. Um, Besides conversations, did anything else help for you?
Therapy with a capital T.
Like
There,
professional therapist? Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I, as probably many people did, I had restarted therapy with a therapist I had previously used. So we had a relationship, and that was great. In May of 2020,
Mm,
when I was having feverish conversations about, is everybody I love going to die of COVID? And Alex, I do think for both of us, we had just gone through an 18-month period of an epic epidemic, and
mm,
had lost so much during that time, and our country lost so much, and the world lost so much. And then on our microcosm level, we had this huge loss. So
yeah.
I have really tried to accept sometimes, I'm like, well, I didn't have it that bad. Like, people have lost parents and siblings and spouses at much earlier ages. So I felt like, gosh, I'm a fully formed adult. Why am I having such a hard time with this?
Yeah.
And definitely through therapy, identifying the 18 months leading up to it were incredibly stressful. And it's your father, it's your parent figure. There's nothing that can prepare you for that loss. And I think therapy gives you space to grieve. It kind of gives you a neutral party, right? There's something about going to your closest friends or your partner or your spouse, but then sometimes it's a neutral party and they don't even know that your father. And it's just nice to be able to talk about them to someone that doesn't know them.
Yeah.
And so I think in my case, she served both to validate how hard this was and to give me a space to explore everything that I was feeling. I also will give a shout out to, and I was going to bring this up, mindfulness meditation.
Mm,
I think I discovered it, I can't even remember now, 6-7 years ago. And the idea of metacognition, what am I thinking about? And catching myself, am I in a rumination about this time that my dad did something that really made me mad and I wish I could talk to him about it? And 5 minutes go by and you're ruminating about a fantasy that isn't even based in
yeah.
reality,
Yeah.
and not realizing it. And so I think something that's been really important is I'm much more aware of thoughts that pop into my head, if I have an emotional response, and then does a behavior emulate from that. And I can give myself a few more seconds now. If a negative memory pops into my head, before it cascades into a full blown, again, not anything based in reality, I can stop it and just say, that's an interesting memory.
Yeah.
How about you? What worked for you? Did you say, like, what would be the couple of top things that worked best for you?
Yeah. Therapy did help. Um, More about acknowledging and accepting what is
Yeah.
happening. Because I think a part of grieving or watching someone die is a rejection. Like, I hate this, and so I'm going to deny its
Yes.
reality.
Because it's so
Um,
painful.
Right. It's easier to say no to. Um, and I think awareness was the key skill that I was able to develop because of all of this. There's a couple of exercises that I did, mindfulness exercises, that helped me see how much shame and guilt I have in my life, how much I've accumulated that over my professional career and from my childhood.
Yes,
Uh,
I'm a woman and I was raised Catholic, so yes, I am quite familiar with those with
yeah,
those feelings.
yeah. I think a lot of people with any religious tradition can relate to feeling guilty or shameful,
Yep.
myself included. I I I I remember after him dying, and I just spent time in here.
Yeah.
I just hung out in here all day. I couldn't I couldn't get myself to leave other than to go to bed.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember just the horrible thoughts that would go through my head. You're a worthless father. You're a worthless husband. You're a worthless worker. You're going to fail. Your children are going to suffer for these decisions that you're making by your inaction. And it was through these exercises that brought about awareness that I was able to say, I know I feel that. And self-criticism has a place professionally. It certainly is helpful at times. But it's really not helpful when you're grieving. And as much as I would rather have my dad back and all of the shame and guilt that I carried, um, it has been life transforming to be able to let go of so much of that guilt and shame.
Man, I completely agree.
Yeah. I mean, it's a poor trade-off.
Absolutely.
I wish I could have my dad back, but I can't. And, rather than feeling guilty or bad about things, it is so much easier now for me to observe negative thoughts, like you mentioned, and ask critical questions of, okay, is this what I really want to feel? Do I need to accept this as the truth? Um, and I'll admit the simple things too. Physical touch. Um, I don't. Whenever I say that, I think it sounds weird or creepy, but being able to hug my wife, who very unfortunately lost her dad when she was a teenager, and then she lost her stepfather just a year before I lost my dad.
That's right.
Yeah, and she lost all of her grandparents in the span of like 3 years. Um, but her being able to cuddle with her, hug her, was comforting. Um, we cuddled for hours at times, and maybe that's too intimate to share in a
Nope.
podcast, but like I
No,
needed
I'm
it.
here for
Needed,
it. Because you
I
feel
needed
so
the touch.
isolated. You
And
feel isolated in your head, in your grief.
I, I probably can't grab her high enough to show her, but we got a puppy, we got a dog just about a month after he passed. He was deathly allergic to dogs, so like we couldn't have an animal because we lived close to him, and we got a dog immediately, and um, that was instrumental in my well-being. Um, Being able to take care of something, like forced to take care of something. I mean, my children are fine, like they're old enough now that they can make themselves a sandwich, and we have plenty of food in the house. So like having a puppy, forcing myself to go outside, forcing myself to play with it, um, was very helpful in getting my mind off of myself, which is what grief is really good at, you know, consuming your thoughts about your pain.
Well said. You
Yeah.
spend a lot of time just falling inward on yourself.
Yeah. It's so easy. Even to justify, like, you could have done more. And I remember the whole year that he was dying from cancer slowly. I remember telling myself, you should be over there. You should be going there every day. But every time seeing him and who he was so disheartening, was just so discouraging. But unless you've experienced it, you don't know how to handle those thoughts and those shameful feelings of like, what, you start imagining that if only you were stronger, if only you
Yeah.
were better, if only you could handle this, then you could be really proud of yourself. When the truth is, this is out of your control, and this person is dying just like you will, and everyone else will. Um, there was a, I remember there was 2 weeks where I didn't go visit them at all. We were at least seeing them twice or 3 times a week, but there was 2 weeks where I just couldn't bring myself to going there. Um, and that's what me that time helped me see I'm I'm depressed.
Yeah.
Like, I'm legitimately very unhappy. Um, but yeah, therapy, conversations, talking with people who have gone through something similar. I couldn't recommend something more. Um,
I think uh, uh, a base level for me is I thought I should have been more prepared for how I was going to feel. And it's taken me a long time to give myself grace and not feel guilty that I wasn't more prepared. My dad was sick for so long. What did I think the outcome was going to be? Right. So
yeah,
again, just that cycle of criticism at how are you falling apart? Like you knew this was going to happen. And I just want, you and I have talked a lot about this, and I have with other people, like it's okay, because there is nothing that can prepare you for that loss. If there was, we'd all be reading that book and listening to that podcast and
yeah.
right, like having some training for us to all go through. There was I was so overcome also by like I just was knocked down completely,
Hmm.
and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, this is it's going to be hard, it's going to be challenging, which is why I think that for anyone listening, maybe you are going through it now, or maybe it's already happened, or maybe if you're watching this going, what in the world are these guys talking about? It's likely going to happen. If you have anyone you love, there is a possibility you can lose them. um, I did want to give some information to let people know, like, what can you do about this. um, I think from the recommendations we've already given so far, therapy, like, this is not a problem that you need to face alone.
No, you
um,
can't. You shouldn't. You can. I was about to say
can
you can't, but you can. I just don't think you should. And don't you think as pharmacists, we we are so autonomous and independent, and we're problem solvers, and we can find a solution out of this grief. And I just don't think you can on your own.
Yeah, and it's funny you say it that way. It reminds me a lot of burnout.
Mm,
People think that they can fix their own burnout when it's caused by the environment, right? And grief, if you didn't have anybody you loved, then yeah, you won't be hurt. You won't have any grief. But then life won't be as full either. Um, and so talk to a therapist. And your therapist isn't your mom, it's not your partner, it's not your kids. It's someone trained to being able to recognize what you're going through. I think you and I talked about this as well, that both of our mothers rely on us, or have
yes.
relied on us very heavily. And when you're going through pain, it's very hard to give to someone else who's going through that same pain, if not more than you, right? Both of our moms, I mean, they lost their partner,
Yes.
you know? Um,
And just of note, right? Shout out to all those only children out there, as Alex and I are. And so just I
mm,
think maybe some people,
yeah.
and I don't have children by choice, and so they might be thinking like, didn't you, have other people to rely on? And for you and I specifically, and some people, don't have a relationship with their sibling and might feel like an only child, but there really was no one else in our immediate family except our mothers. And so it really then, I think, was a hyper focus on you and I to provide that care once the spouse was gone.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, unless you're prepared for it, it's a very difficult conversation
Mm,
to tell your, I don't know, the partner of who've lost someone that, like, I can listen, but I can't help you.
I can't fix this.
Yeah. That was really hard. I remember having to do that, talking with my mom in a car for like an hour parked, that, like, this is your struggle. I am your son and I love you, but I don't have the compassion, the empathy, the skills to
Mm-mm.
help you through this. That was very hard because I had been giving and giving for months on end. It's yeah, the things you get to learn because of grief. It's no fun. But if you are wondering, what is it that you can do for your job? Um, there's a couple things that I think everyone should know. It is highly state specific. So I didn't know if you knew this, Laura, but states like Illinois, and Oregon as well have mandated bereavement leave. Were you aware of that?
I was not, and I'm in Illinois.
Yeah. Um, it does depend. And I think you could probably expect your state to be having bereavement leave if it leans more Democratic versus Republican. No comment there about that sort of thing. But um, the FMLA, so Family and Medical Leave Act, doesn't explicitly provide bereavement leave, but some states do have provisions. So basically, you need to see where's the employer, and do they have a policy in place.
Hmm.
And ultimately, I think this is probably way more company specific. So it sounds like in your case, Laura, you were able to talk with your supervisor about what you were going through and come up with a plan. Is that what happened?
Absolutely. Yep. And I'm nodding off camera here. Absolutely. Right. And especially as I mentioned, there was kind of 3 weeks and then the week of hospice leading up to that, where we were at the hospice facility sometimes overnight and all day. And my employer did not require me. I think I did take a couple of days of PTO actually at the beginning, but I did not have to burn through vacation as some people listening. And again, if you're a contract employee, right, having to use your own PTO or your own time off to go through the part leading up to the actual bereavement. So this is really good to know, Alex, that people might have guidelines for getting a little bit of space that they really need.
Yeah. So if you know this is coming, or maybe you're going through it right now, talk with HR, talk with your manager. If you're working at a place where they make you feel guilty about this, or if they tell you we need you and we can't have you take off this time,
And we all know who we're thinking about.
not calling out names.
That's right. But we're all thinking the same letters. Uh-huh.
I actually just put out a post about this. A pharmacist told me that they lost, I can't remember who it was, if it was a partner now or spouse when I made that post, but it was something like they lost someone dear to them, and then their employer asked them, you have to come in next week.
I have heard so many.
Yeah.
If you're listening, I know either you have felt that way or someone has told you a story of management saying we need you to come in. And that's not okay. Just to validate, like that's not okay.
No, absolutely not. That's a problem of their system.
That's right.
That's not your fault.
That's right.
That's a whole other separate podcast
Let's
discussion.
let's
But
do it, part two. That's right. And easier said than done, right? To say to your district manager, I'm not coming in, you deal with it. There'll be repercussions there, right? So that's a whole, let's put that on a next agenda item.
yeah, and to call out what that problem is specifically is their systems don't allow for typical things that happen in life.
That's right.
If you had a broken leg, you wouldn't be there.
That's right.
You have a broken soul, which honestly has like in today's world, worse consequences than a broken leg.
Would you want, again, you and I just talked about the cognitive burden of grieving. Who would want that employee checking prescriptions? And we are perfectionists, but you wouldn't want someone grieving to be flying your plane. Why would you even be wanting them to be working?
Yeah. Yeah. Dispensing drugs that can kill people.
Absolutely.
Different employers do. I did see a couple of things. I saw that some companies do provide counseling.
Wonderful.
Yeah, varying levels of success, but I think it is nice that they at least offer it, because we've been mentioning how great therapy is, but it can get expensive.
Oh, it's a
depending on
privilege.
how long you do it. Yeah,
Absolutely a privilege.
There are some companies as well. I've seen these in hospitals where they have assistant programs, support groups. We are seeing mainly from the major movers, like places like Mayo and stuff, have support groups for things like moral injury, even abuse. And so I would try to lean on those if you can. I would even go as far as to say, be willing to negotiate if you can for a flexible schedule. One friend of mine who lost someone, I won't say who, but one of the things that they were able to do was going from 5-day work week to a 4. That it hit him in the wallet, but it was nice to be able to have more time. He eventually was able to go back to his normal schedule, but it was a nice break because it gave him extra time to process, do nothing, but still being able to perform as an employee. And I want to encourage you, if you're going through this, that you need to do what makes the most sense. If you know you're going to lose someone to cancer, say it's terminal, my encouragement, the thing that helped me honestly, was having an emergency fund. There were definitely times that I was freaking out about money as an entrepreneur. I won't lie about that. Entrepreneur life is, it's up and down. It's a roller coaster ride. And I remember we were at a lawyer's office discussing his will with the lawyer. And I had a panic attack during that conversation because I think one of my sales teams, deals didn't go through. And then, so all of a sudden I had this thought process of, your business is failing because you're not fully engaged. You're going to lose this. You're going to have to go back to work. And I was imagining all these awful scenarios for my future, that I'd be branded as a loser and a failure and all of that. And it was so sad because we went to my favorite restaurant after that appointment, ordered my favorite meal. It tasted like mush. It tasted awful. I couldn't enjoy it. And what was stupid too is that the next week, things were fine. Sales was back on track. Team was fine. Everyone was fine.
You feel so vulnerable. But I mean, you just, again,
you're
losing someone, and it really does bring out so many vulnerabilities because it's scary and you're scared. I was really scared of life for years afterwards, and it was almost 3 years.
Did you think you were going to lose your job at one point?
Yes, because of decreasing pharmacy enrollment.
Mm,
that has been the last 3 years. So I
yeah.
worried about it and it felt really scary.
Right.
And then it's just loss on top of loss on top of loss.
And your brain, yeah, your mind is really bad at running your life.
I couldn't agree more.
And it's going to find any bad thing to like
Yes.
justify why you should feel scared or awful.
Negativity bias because it keeps you alive.
Yeah. That ancient mind that we have
You
that
got
it
it.
was afraid of outside the cave has now become afraid of survival and paying bills. Um, and it will attempt to find anything else that's wrong in life just
Yeah.
to make you feel productive and worried about something.
I really only feel like I've learned this, Alex, the last few years, and you're a little bit younger than I am, wink, wink. And so I'm really grateful that you learned this now because if you aren't aware that you're wrapped up in, I mean, so many negative thoughts that aren't validated.
Yeah.
I know, listen, we have career coaching for a reason to overcome those negative thoughts. That's my job, is to overcome them because they're evolutionarily built into what you're doing, and being scared of change because that can threaten your livelihood. I mean, it's
Yeah.
normal to feel this way.
The other recommendation, and I think you'll like this, um, and I was able to find a contact that helped me through this. I'd recommend contacting your state association. It may feel out of left field in this, but I was able to get in contact with one of my state's association people because I actually knew that he lost his father.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful
And
that you reached out.
yeah, I remember calling up the state association and saying, "Hey, I just want to talk to this person." And we had a great like hour and a half talk. I'm not saying that I don't know. I'm imagining like state associations getting all these calls, but that's what they're here for. They're here to support us in our professional journeys.
Yes.
And whether we want to acknowledge it or not, we're human. We have emotions, we have love, and grief is just love with nowhere to go. If you don't have coping mechanisms, if you don't know someone professionally who's gone through something like this, it can make the journey that, much more challenging. I'm blessed to have you in my life, Laura, and others as well who have lost people. And if you don't know anyone, don't be afraid to reach out. It's going to feel vulnerable, I imagine. It's going to feel weird, especially if you're not a member. I wasn't at the time when I was asking for help. But at the end of the day, they know that you're a person. And I haven't met too many associations that don't care for a pharmacist, regardless of if they're a member or not.
They will welcome you with open arms as the past willing president of the Illinois Pharmacists Association, ilpharmacist.org. We would love to have you. I'll take any opportunity to tout the benefits of state association. And I know now more than ever, it's very isolating out there.
Yeah. Um, hmm.
One thing I will just want to mention too is I lost a pet. As you know, I lost my dear cat that I had for 14 years. His brother is still going, but I lost a cat in July of 2021, and then my dad passed in October. And I just always want to take time. Two things. One, I don't think we talk about pet loss enough. People have pets for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and then all of a sudden that part of your family is gone. And I don't really think we talk about it a lot. I was devastated, completely devastated when that happened. And I think that knocked me down. I know it knocked me down more, so that when October came, I was depleted even more. Um, And two, I hope that people kind of recognize the accumulative effect of loss, and that that's okay as well. Because sometimes, since those losses, I've had kind of some other significant adjacent loss, not in my immediate family, but my chosen family. And it has just been really tough. So, right, like you and I have talked a lot about this. I am just getting back to feeling like, quote, myself, even though I have to admit, I do feel like a different person. I do feel like a stronger person. And you've alluded to that. And for that, I am grateful.
Oh, actually, I think that would be helpful to share. When you were grieving, did you feel like you wanted a timeline
Oh,
for your
yeah.
recovery? Yeah,
Yeah,
same
right.
here.
I wanted a very 90-degree linear chart, and
Yep.
that every
Yeah.
single day I was going to feel better. And
Mhm.
something that was really helpful was that someone said the grief stays the same size in your life just grows around it. And so right at the beginning, it just is taking up the most biggest part of your life, and grief is not linear.
I wanted a timeline as well.
Oh man, so bad.
Um,
Just tell me when it's going to feel better.
yeah.
Somebody.
Um, yeah. When am I going to be normal again?
Oh gosh.
Um, and I think everyone is unfortunately different. I think it's best to have the outlook of things will get better, but they're going to suck. It's going to be hard. And I
Do
think the
you
quicker you can accept it, the easier the journey was. I think for the first month, you're just reeling that this happened. This person is gone. They're not coming back. Um, and I don't think it's meant to be easy if you love them. Um, it's very unfortunate. The only thing that I think can permanently take the pain away is going into a coma, getting addicted perhaps to drugs. That has worse consequences, I think, for everyone. Though there's just there is no cure, there is no solution, unfortunately. Um, but to share my timeline, just for context purposes, um, it took me 2 months to come back to work, to be able to say, okay, I'm going to be present. But I think it took me 12 months to like, I'm normal. I'm back to driven, I'm back to ambitious, and I'm back to who I think I am. Um,
I would say 18 for me.
yeah,
And that was still like eight, I of course as a pharmacist put numbers like maybe 80-90%.
yeah, yeah, and there will be hard moments too in the future. There will be
Mhm.
moments where you'll see something and you'll think of them. Um, I you'll appreciate this. I was actually cleaning my email because I had some large files in there, and I was going through emails by file size, and I found one from my dad. It was this presentation that we were going to give to the city council to like clean up a park. We were going to be asking for money to like make it look nicer, and I was like, I can't delete this email, And as I read it, I was like, oh, I miss him, and I stopped working. I went out of my office. I went to go hug my daughter, and I was like, oh, this this stinks. This stinks.
And I think that your dad knows, and he on some level knows that how much you miss him. And I personally loved talking about TV shows with my dad. That was a nice, easy topic, and we had similar tastes. And so the pain in your heart when I want to pick up the phone and call him and
Mm,
tell him about something, and then I still do in my head have a conversation about what I like about a show, right? So I think just because physically you can't talk to them and you can't call them and you can't be with them, but I still think it feels really good to just say in your head or even say out loud or write down like what you would want to say to them, because they're still there. The memory of them is always going to be there.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard it said before that grief is love with nowhere to go, and that
It's so true.
it's so uncomfortable.
I hate it. I want to be a robot.
Yeah. Yeah, or you try to convince yourself, okay, I'm never going to love someone. It's just so that I don't get hurt again.
Those thoughts have gone through my head.
Yeah.
You guys, it goes through your head. You're like, I can't do this. I can't be a human.
Yeah.
But we're doing it. And we're talking about it. And listen, if you want to find me on LinkedIn and send me a message, if you need support or you just want to get something off your chest, please do.
Thank you for your generosity, Laura. Thank you for sharing your story.
I love, Alex, that you wanted to talk about this and put this out there. And people are suffering from so many different things. And grief is just one of them that I think we could talk more about.
This was a different podcast. Normally, I like talking about things that are going well for people, movers and shakers, and really cool things that are going on in pharmacy with our clients or just influencers in our space. And I would, it was hard to convince myself to do this because I didn't know if it would resonate with people. I didn't know if it was the right time. But after talking with Laura about this, sharing our journeys, I know that this is the right message to share with people when you're going through it. I don't know you. I don't know what you're going through. I hate that you're losing someone. I know what that feels like. And I'm sorry that it's happening. You can't change it. You can just do your best. And sometimes your best means being worthless, not contributing to the family, not helping out. It's okay to be in pain. It sucks, but it doesn't have to last forever. It doesn't have to be something that needs to be more painful than it has to be. And if I was talking to a younger me going through this pain, I think this conversation would have helped me. I wish I had it then. I'm not a grief counselor. I'm not a therapist. But I know this pain, and I want you to know that you're not alone. And I sincerely hope that you can enjoy what maybe little time you have with your loved ones. That after they're gone, you can celebrate them and the life and the times that you did get to have with them. And it's my hope that you can take that love that you had for them at one point and give it to someone else. Because I think that is what your missing person would want. It's what my dad would have wanted for me. It's been over 2 years and I still miss him a ton. You know, the bad part about grief is you can't help but like be ugly while you cry when you're trying to talk. Like it's never going to look good. Um and on that note, Thank you for watching this episode of the Happy PharmD. We normally talk about all things careers and helping people get into better jobs that they love. But sometimes it's a nice change of pace to be real about something that happens to thousands of people every day or every month. And my hope is that this was helpful to you. And if it was, please leave a comment, leave an encouraging word for someone else, because there's 330,000 pharmacists in the United States. At least one of us is going through some hard dookie right now. And we need to band together in order to move forward into a brighter tomorrow. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you have a great day.